Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's story isn't about revenge or anger. It's about a haunting kind of awakening. The moment when a narcissistic woman who once thrived on control, manipulation, and emotional dominance finally faced something she couldn't control: death. The death of the only person who ever truly loved her. This story is not just about loss, it's about realization. The cruel mirror that shows her what love really was only after it's gone forever. For years she played the same game. She charmed, lied, and twisted emotions like threads in her hand. She believed affection was weakness and vulnerability was a tool. The man who loved her, endlessly patient, gentle, forgiving, was her favorite target. He gave without expectation, loved without condition. She mistook that love for weakness, a thing to exploit, until the day she learned he would never answer again, never forgive again, never return. When she first heard of his death, she didn't cry. She couldn't. Her emotions had long been buried under layers of arrogance and denial. She told herself it didn't matter that he was gone, and so what? But that night when the world went silent and no one was left to mirror her existence, something cracked inside her. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. It sounded like regret. Regret is a feeling she had always dismissed as weakness. But this time, it invaded her like a slow poison. Every cruel word she'd thrown at him replayed in her head like a ghost refusing to rest. She remembered his eyes, the way they used to soften when she lied, as if he already knew and forgave her anyway. She used to feel powerful watching him hurt and stay. Now that same memory burned like fire in her chest. In the days that followed, she tried to distract herself. Social media, new admirers, laughter that sounded forced even to her own ears. But everything felt hollow. The world had lost its color. She realized that every new admirer she chased was only a shadow, a reflection of the one man who had seen through her and loved her anyway. For the first time, she didn't feel adored. She felt empty. The attention that once fueled her now sickened her. People say narcissists can't feel real loss, but the truth is, they can, just differently. She didn't mourn the man himself. She mourned the reflection of herself in his love. His forgiveness had made her feel human, even when she wasn't acting like one. Without it, she felt exposed, stripped of the illusion of goodness she had always borrowed from his compassion. His death didn't just take him away, it took away her mask. Late at night, she started rereading old messages, replaying old voicemails, searching for something, maybe proof that he still loved her, even at the end. But all she found were words soaked in patience, kindness, and exhaustion. "I hope one day you find peace," he'd said in his last message. She didn't understand it then. Now those words echoed like a curse, because peace was the one thing she had never known, and now she couldn't borrow his. At first she told herself she'd move on quickly, just find someone new to fill the void. But every date, every conversation felt meaningless. She would catch glimpses of him everywhere. In the way someone laughed, in the smell of coffee, in the quiet kindness of strangers. It was unbearable. For the first time she didn't want attention. She wanted forgiveness, not from him but from herself. The realization came slowly, painfully. She had spent her whole life trying to win love through control, when real love had always been freely given to her, and she destroyed it. The irony broke her. She began to see the pattern, not just with him, but with everyone she had ever pushed away. Her entire life had been one long chase for admiration, but now she saw that admiration was nothing compared to genuine affection. One night, she visited his grave. No one saw her cry, but she did. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just quiet, shaking tears that came from somewhere she didn't know still existed. She placed a letter on the ground, a letter filled with words she never had the courage to say. "You were right. I thought I was powerful, but you were the strong one all along." For the first time she said the one word she had never used sincerely in her life: sorry. After that night, she couldn't go back to her old self. Something had shifted. The power she once felt from being desired was gone. Compliments sounded meaningless, flattery felt false. Every kind word from others reminded her of the one voice she could never hear again. She realized she hadn't lost just a person. She'd lost her mirror, the one who had reflected her best potential even when she showed him her worst. In the weeks that followed, guilt began to replace pride. It wasn't the shallow guilt she used to fake to get sympathy. It was real, raw, and terrifying. She started seeing memories differently. Moments she once felt victorious over now made her sick. The time she mocked his vulnerability, the day she ignored his pain, every cruel act replayed like a film she couldn't turn off. For the first time she felt empathy, but it came too late. Her friends noticed the change. The once lively woman who dominated every room now sat quietly, lost in thought. They called it grief, but she knew it was more than that. It was the slow unraveling of her identity. Who was she without admiration, without someone to manipulate, without the man whose love had once given her a sense of worth she never earned? The emptiness inside her wasn't just loneliness, it was exposure. She began to visit the places they used to go, not to relive the past, but to understand it. The cafe where he used to wait for her, always smiling even when she was late. The park bench where he once told her, "You make it hard to love you, but I still do." Those words haunted her. Back then she thought it was weakness. Now, she saw it for what it was, strength, the kind she never had. At home, she found the old photo album he made for her birthday. She had never appreciated it before. She used to mock him for being sentimental. But now, she turned each page slowly, as if handling something sacred. Each photo was a reminder of how deeply he had loved her, and how much she had taken that love for granted. Tears fell on the pages as she whispered to the empty room, "Why didn't I see it?" The hardest part came when she realized she had no one to confess to. She had spent her life pushing people away, turning every genuine connection into a performance. Who could she talk to now about the weight crushing her heart? Every apology she rehearsed would fall on silence. The man she had hurt the most was gone, and forgiveness, the one thing she suddenly craved, was forever out of reach. Sleep became difficult. Every dream was a memory twisted into regret. In one, she saw him walking away, turning to smile at her one last time. She'd wake up reaching for a hand that wasn't there. Morning light brought no comfort, only the cruel reminder that she couldn't undo what she had done. The realization was brutal. She had spent years chasing control, and now she couldn't even control her own remorse. Days turned into weeks, and she found herself doing something she never thought possible. Reflecting. Not blaming, not justifying, but truly reflecting. She started reading about emotional abuse, manipulation, and narcissism. Each sentence felt like a mirror showing her the monster she had become. It was unbearable, but she didn't turn away. For the first time, she wanted to understand why she destroyed the one person who tried to love her whole. That understanding didn't come easily. She discovered that her cruelty wasn't power. It was fear. Every lie, every manipulation, every game she played had been armor against vulnerability. Loving him had terrified her because it meant being seen, so she destroyed what she couldn't control. But now, standing alone in the ruins, she finally understood that real strength had nothing to do with dominance. It had everything to do with honesty. She began to visit his grave more often, not to beg for forgiveness, but to listen to the quiet, to her own thoughts, to the faint whispers of humility growing inside her. She would sit for hours, talking softly about her day, as if he could still hear her. Each visit became a kind of confession, and though no voice ever answered, she started to feel something unexpected. Peace, fragile but real. Something inside her began to shift. For the first time in her life, she stopped trying to perform emotions and simply allowed herself to feel them. The guilt, the loss, the regret, they were overwhelming, but also strangely cleansing. She realized she couldn't control these feelings, and that was precisely what made them real. The woman who once thrived on pretending was now learning authenticity through pain, one quiet day at a time. She began writing letters she would never send, not just to him but to everyone she had hurt. Her words were shaky, filled with apologies that had no audience. Still, she kept writing. Each letter stripped away another layer of her false identity. The process wasn't about seeking forgiveness, it was about confronting truth. For the first time she saw how much destruction she had caused, not because she was evil but because she was terrified of being unloved. Her reflection in the mirror started to look different. The same face that once radiated vanity now looked softer, almost human. She noticed the exhaustion in her eyes, the vulnerability she had always hidden. She no longer recognized the woman who used charm as a weapon. It frightened her at first, but then for the first time she didn't look away. She whispered to her reflection, "Maybe this is who I was supposed to be all along." The people around her were cautious. Some who had once adored her kept their distance, waiting to see if the change was real. She didn't blame them. She knew trust wasn't something you could demand. It was something you had to earn, something she had spent a lifetime breaking. So instead of forcing affection, she began practicing silence, listening more than she spoke. It felt strange, but it also felt right. One afternoon, she volunteered at a local shelter. A small, quiet act of service. At first, it was awkward. She didn't know how to help without expecting attention in return. But then she met an elderly woman who reminded her of the man she had lost. Gentle, forgiving, endlessly kind. As she handed out food, something unexpected happened. She felt warmth. Not pride, not ego. Just a simple human warmth she hadn't known in years. Each day she returned, not because anyone noticed, but because she needed to feel useful without being adored. She began to understand what real giving meant, that it had nothing to do with control and everything to do with empathy. The work was quiet, humble, and unseen, but it was healing her in ways she couldn't explain. For the first time, she wasn't performing goodness, she was living it. At night, she still dreamed of him. Sometimes he was smiling, sometimes distant. But in those dreams, she no longer begged for forgiveness. She simply stood beside him in silence, acknowledging the love she once mocked. When she woke, she no longer felt haunted, just grateful. Grateful that she had known someone capable of loving her despite everything, and grateful that his memory had become the compass guiding her out of the person she used to be. Her transformation wasn't sudden or miraculous. It was slow, uncomfortable, and filled with relapses into old habits. There were moments she still wanted attention, still caught herself craving validation, but each time she stopped sooner. Each time she recognized the pattern. Awareness became her new strength, not perfection, but progress. She was beginning to understand that real change isn't dramatic, it's consistent. As months passed, the bitterness that had once fueled her began to fade. In its place grew something fragile but powerful: humility. She learned to say thank you without manipulation, I'm sorry without excuses, and I don't know without shame. These small admissions became her daily practice of humanity. For someone who once believed vulnerability was weakness, this surrender felt like the purest form of strength. One day she returned to his grave again, this time not in tears but in quiet reflection. She brought no letter, no flowers, just herself. She sat down and whispered, I think I understand now. The wind brushed gently against her face, and for the first time, she didn't feel haunted by loss. She felt connected, not to his memory, but to her own awakening. In that stillness, she knew that love had changed her, even after death. From that day forward, her life became quieter. But in a meaningful way, she no longer sought grand moments or attention. She started finding beauty in small things. The warmth of morning sunlight, the sound of rain, the laughter of strangers. These simple details grounded her. She realized that for years, she had been chasing intensity, mistaking chaos for passion. Now peace felt like a new kind of love, gentle, honest, and free of control. Her relationships changed too. She no longer tried to dominate conversations or turn every moment into a reflection of herself. She started listening, really listening. When someone spoke about their pain, she didn't interrupt with advice or comparison. She just sat there, present. It surprised her how healing it felt to care without needing to be seen. The empathy she once weaponized was finally becoming real, and it softened everything inside her. There were still days when guilt returned, creeping in like a shadow. On those days, she reminded herself that remorse without action is useless. So she kept choosing kindness, one moment at a time. Sometimes she'd help a stranger or call someone just to ask how they were. These weren't grand gestures, but they were real. Every small act of goodness became her way of saying sorry to the world, and maybe in a way to him. She began journaling again, not to control her image, but to understand herself. Her writing wasn't beautiful or perfect. It was raw. Pages filled with confessions, memories, and realizations that tore through her pride. She wrote about the woman she used to be, the one who confused love with control, attention with affection. As the words spilled out, she started forgiving that woman, not excusing her, but releasing her. Healing, she realized, meant letting go of her own hatred. Sometimes, she'd find herself talking to him out loud, as if he were still there. "You wouldn't recognize me now," she'd say softly. But maybe that's a good thing. These conversations weren't desperate anymore. They were grounding. She no longer felt haunted by his absence. She felt guided by his memory. The man who once loved her had become something larger than grief. He had become her reminder that love leaves lessons, even when it's gone. As she rebuilt herself, she stopped needing to prove anything. She didn't need validation, admiration, or attention. For the first time, she liked who she was when no one was watching. That realization brought both pain and peace. Pain, because she knew how much destruction it took to reach this point. Peace, because she finally understood what he had tried to teach her all along, that love isn't about ownership, it's about freedom. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. Some people from her past reached out, surprised by her calmness. Others didn't trust it, believing it was just another act. But she didn't argue or defend herself. Change, she learned, doesn't need to be announced. It needs to be lived. So she let her actions speak quietly. She knew the truth now. Real growth doesn't demand recognition. It exists peacefully, whether anyone believes it or not. Months turned into a year, and grief slowly transformed into gratitude. She no longer cried when she thought of him. Instead, she smiled, a bittersweet, knowing smile. He had been both her mirror and her teacher. His love had exposed her flaws, and his loss had forced her to face them. The greatest irony of her life was that she became a better person because of the pain she caused the only one who never wanted to hurt her. One evening, she sat watching the sunset, feeling something she hadn't felt in years: contentment. She whispered to the fading light, "You saved me, even in your absence." The words carried no drama, no self-pity, only truth. She realized she didn't need redemption from anyone else. Her redemption was in the way she now lived, quietly, kindly, honestly. That was how she honored him. That was how she honored love itself. Though she would always carry a trace of sorrow, it no longer defined her. The narcissistic woman she once was had died the same day he did, replaced by someone humbler, softer, more human. She had spent her life running from accountability, and now she walked straight into it. And with each step she reclaimed a piece of her soul. Her story wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about transformation, the kind born from truth, loss, and love that refuses to die. Years later, people who once knew her barely recognized her. She no longer walked into rooms demanding attention. Instead, she entered quietly, carrying a gentleness that drew people in without effort. It wasn't charm anymore. It was peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop performing. The world no longer revolved around her reflection. It revolved around connection. And in that shift, she discovered something she had never known: sincerity. There were still scars, invisible ones that time couldn't erase. But instead of hiding them, she began to wear them as reminders. They were proof that she had been broken and rebuilt. They reminded her of the man who had loved her enough to show her what love truly meant. Every time she felt her old instincts rising, the need to control, to manipulate, to protect her ego, she would take a breath and whisper, "Not again." She began sharing her story, not as a confession, but as a warning. At small gatherings or quiet dinners, she'd speak honestly about who she used to be. She didn't glamorize her transformation or paint herself as redeemed. She spoke simply, from the heart, about how it took losing someone irreplaceable to wake her up. People listened, some with tears in their eyes. She realized her story had power not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. She often told others, "You can't wait for tragedy to make you kind." That became her quiet mantra. She had lived through the consequences of her blindness, and now she wanted to help others see before it was too late. Her journey from self-obsession to self-awareness wasn't beautiful. It was brutal, but it was real. And in that realness, she found meaning, the kind that no validation or admiration could ever give. Sometimes, she still visited his grave, less out of grief now, and more out of gratitude. She would sit, her hand tracing the cold stone, and say, "You changed me." She didn't ask for signs anymore. She didn't need forgiveness. She simply offered thanks for the love that taught her, the loss that broke her, and the silence that forced her to finally listen to her own soul. That silence, once unbearable, had become her peace. She no longer sought to erase her past. She embraced it, because every cruel word, every selfish act, every moment of arrogance had led her to this quiet place of understanding. She couldn't undo what she had done, but she could make sure it would never be repeated. In that acceptance, she found redemption, not from the world, but from herself. She no longer needed to be adored. She only needed to be honest. And in her honesty, she discovered something she had always feared: vulnerability. But instead of weakness, it brought her strength. She started forming real friendships, the kind built on empathy, not manipulation. She learned how to listen without strategy, how to love without fear. People began to trust her again, not because she demanded it, but because she finally earned it. Slowly, her life began to fill with authenticity. The irony was never lost on her, that the man she had once broken had become her greatest teacher. His love lived on, not in haunting memories, but in her actions. Every kind word she spoke, every patient gesture, every moment of compassion was a tribute to him. She couldn't bring him back, but she could carry his lesson forward. And in doing so, she gave his love a second life, through her own. Now when she looks in the mirror, she doesn't see perfection. She sees someone who finally understands what it means to love and be loved. She sees a woman who was once lost in her own reflection, but found her way out through loss, pain, and awakening. Her eyes no longer seek admiration, they seek meaning. And in that gaze you can see it clearly. She has changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but deeply, and for real. To anyone listening right now, take this to heart. Sometimes it takes losing what's real to recognize its worth. Don't wait until love becomes a ghost to learn how to cherish it. If someone loves you purely, don't test it, honor it. And if you've been the one who hurt someone who loved you, let this story be your reminder that change is possible, but it begins with truth. Thank you for watching. Remember to protect your peace, live with empathy, and never take real love for granted again.